What is up, guys? Today, I had something come up which presents an opportunity. Unfortunately, it is an issue, and it's an issue which is impacting several of my members and several members in the greater enterprise. Now, my initial feelings on this issue are that it's unjust and unfair. And so it causes me a lot of passion, a lot of emotion, and that's the story that I've told myself. That's the perception that I have about the situation that we're in. And so I could storm in to a conversation and basically scream that it is unjust and unfair. And I know that I'll be ignored. I know that my perspective will basically be rejected. So I'm going to need a little bit more finesse as I approach this issue. And this is a great example of how I've learned to approach difficult situations as this. Ultimately, my key goal is going to be persuasive, right? To win someone over towards my perspective, so that way we can achieve an outcome which I feel like will fix the situation or address the issue for the members impacted, and really correct a lot of things that are at stake. So I want to go and talk about my approach. The first step that I'm going to do is to seek allies. The very first step. This is maybe what I like to do personally, but I think that it's a very useful step. So I look around at other potential key stakeholders that have a vested interest in the issue at hand, so that way I can go have a discussion with them and get their perspective. And this gives me a couple benefits. This allows me to validate my perspective, validate my point of view, and to understand other points of views. Does this seem right? Does it pass a gut check? Or is this just an emotional response that I have and actually I'm misinterpreting the event? The second thing that I like to do is to go across all the sources I can find and collect facts. What was the original expectation that was set? What did we communicate in this particular instance, in this particular issue? What was communicated? What do we have documented? What can we check against? What are the facts of where we are? And what's the reality? How many people are impacted? What's the size of the impact? How can we demonstrate what the expectation was versus what we actually got, and whether or not the complaint is really truthfully an issue, right? It is when the expectation differs from reality that complaint becomes an issue, like a true issue, a valid issue. Like sometimes people just complain, yet if they're getting exactly what they should expect to get, then the complaint doesn't hold any weight. How large is the impact is another fact that we look to collect. What's at stake? So in this particular instance, the relationship that we have with our members is at stake. Right, in several conversations that you're ever going to have, in which you're probably trying to persuade, or in which you could find yourself trying to persuade, some relationship is probably at stake in some way, shape, or form. Those are the facts that I like to go about collecting. This helps me craft my argument. I think that these are pretty generic rules. Now, specifically what's in there might tweak a little bit, but collecting the facts. Those facts could look different. The group of facts could look different depending upon the issue, but in this particular case, that's what it looks like. The next thing that we do is begin crafting a solution. And the way that I go about this is to consider the key stakeholders that I'm going to be trying to persuade, the key audience, or the audience in general, and what matters most to them. Ultimately, in a key perspective, I'm trying to determine their desires and ultimately how to protect their ego such that they might listen to the points that I'm going to make. Like I said, storming in, screaming, this is unjust and unfair, probably not going to get much reception on the other side. It's basically just hanging up the line, right? This is very similar to some of the other points that I've discussed. So in crafting a solution, the big things that I'm working towards are addressing key concerns. Those are my concerns and potentially, or ideally, the concerns of the critical stakeholders, and overcoming potential objections. So I need to understand who I'm going to be presenting to, who I'm going to be trying to persuade, so that way I can appeal to their greater senses. What matters most to them is going to be the way that I want to approach it. Now, there could be multiple, and in general, I want to cover all those bases, so that way, as long as I'm not directly conflicting with something that's important to someone else, then I can hit all the bases. I can cover all of the desires and protect all of the egos involved. It sounds way more complicated than it is, but if you draw it on paper and you start to craft the solution and say, hey, this is what is important to person A, this is what's important to person B, and this is important to person C, and then consider this will drive opposition if I were to talk about this for A, this for B, this for C. Craft a message that weaves through that. That way you can cover all of their desires, cover all of what's important to them, and ultimately overcome any objections. This is preparing, ultimately, you're trying to craft the perfect solution that they will buy. It doesn't need to be the perfect solution, because they might not buy it. It may not persuade them, and ultimately you may not win out. Then lastly, you need to plead the case. So that's delivering the message that you've crafted with your allies, in support, demonstrating your facts as clearly as possible, and presenting that solution, as I discussed, touching on all the important factors for the stakeholders. Preparation will never eliminate or fully prepare you for the real thing. When you get in there, you might have to real-time argue different points than you prepared for. Now, preparation can set you up for success, but at the end of the day, there's still going to be an element that you have to learn live. You have to learn in the moment and be prepared for. Be patient. Think some of those things through. What a 10, 15 second, 30 second pause to just say, hey, I'm processing this and I need to think this through before I respond is completely and utterly fair. And you need to take that instead of feeling like you need to answer in the moment. Allow pressure to subside a little bit and take time, take some space in order to process through those things. Sometimes you might even have to rejoin. So quit to be like, hey, these are some good arguments that you made. I'm gonna go back, think about them, and I'd like to meet again in a day, or I'd like to meet up for lunch again down the road. This is not just an organizational context. This works in all contexts. The approach will vary as you're in it. Your preparation is your foundation. From there, you might have to take different shots. It might not go perfectly according to plan, like nothing does. But ultimately, the ultimate outcome is what's critical, right? At the end of the day, what I want to do is persuade the stakeholders towards my perspective. That means any one of those points, sub-points in there, or any one of those perspectives that aren't critical, they're not the overall goal, might have to concede those points. Might have to give those ones up. As long as it's facilitating the overall goal that we're working towards, as long as we're moving towards the outcome of agreeing. I could lose on a ton of fronts. It's not a majority rule. Is ultimately, even if they tweak every single point that I make, as long as the ultimate outcome is achieved, that's fantastic. Like I said before, it's not about being right. It's about getting to the resolution, getting to the solution in this case. So this is just the elements of approaching a persuasive argument in which, like, in my heart of hearts, I think that it should be clear that this is the wrong thing. Like, we have inadvertently, without intent, screwed up, and now we need to fix it. Going in there and saying you screwed up or this is unjust or unfair does not protect the egos on the other side. And that's a very important part. I think that's an element of how to win friends and influence people. And it's a key fact today. Humans have not changed very much. Probably in the last ever. We've just been equipped with different tools and different technologies. So just to sum this up, going back, the way I like to approach any persuasive argument is 1, I don't do it alone. I seek allies. 2, I then collect all the facts. And this is across a subset of people and perspectives and finding every piece of fact that I can find. what documented policies have procedures. If it was a personal context, do I have some messages? Do I have any sort of real evidence that I can bring back into a discussion? In this case, it is a little bit about trying to win people over to your perspective. In a way, you are fighting to win, different from the conversation yesterday. But how you win might be by conceding a lot and making something be their idea and allowing them to get the win while you have come in and not just tried to hammer through the fact that something is wrong or you don't agree with it or that your perspective is different. It's finesse. Let them win. As long as the outcome's achieved, that's a win. It does not matter who's actually winning. So, seek allies, collect facts, craft a solution, and then plead your case. Be prepared. But at the end of the day, preparation will only be the foundation. You may have to give a lot of points up, a lot of your arguments, and concede, as long as you're getting towards that ultimate outcome. Hope that worked for you. Give it a shot. You can't lose if you don't quit.